Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time, and boy, oh boy, do I have some important updates for you. Folks, there is a thunderous fallout between the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and former President Donald Trump. I'll show you a clip from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on the floor of the Senate the day the impeachment trial ended. Boy, oh boy, it's an interesting clip. I'll show you the fallout, not just for the Senate Minority Leader, but also all the fractures that are beginning to form in the Republican Party. A number of Republican members in the House have been censured. Pretty unbelievable stuff. Some pretty incredible news about Rudy Giuliani. Yep, you're not going to believe it when you hear this. And a very long response, the longest statement we've heard from former President Trump since he left office in response to the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, where he had some choice words. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda. Welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Let's start with some pretty interesting comments, pretty strong comments from the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Remember, the Senate Minority Leader voted to acquit former President Trump on what he was trying to position as a technicality. So he is, let's be clear, he is trying to have it both ways. But again, pretty strong comments where Mitch McConnell says that Trump could have ended the riot anytime he wanted. Instead, he just watched TV happily and he did not do his job to restore order. Those were just some of the things that Mitch McConnell said. Let's roll the tape and watch closely, and I'll show you the response from former President Trump, which just came in, and some unbelievable news about Rudy Giuliani. So make sure you watch this video all the way through to the end. But first, let's hear from the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from the floor of the Senate, a speech that is going to be watched and analyzed for many, many years out into the future. I believe this speech will be in the history books. Let's watch.
Whatever our ex-president claims he thought might happen that day, whatever reaction he says he meant to produce by that afternoon, we know he was watching the same live television as the rest of us. A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name. These criminals were carrying his banners, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him. It was obvious that only President Trump could end this. He was the only one who could. Former aides publicly begged him to do so. Loyal allies frantically called the administration. The president did not act swiftly. He did not do his job. He didn't take steps so federal law could be faithfully executed and order restored. No. Instead, according to public reports, he watched television happily, as the chaos unfolded. He kept pressing his scheme to overturn the election. Now, even after it was clear to any reasonable observer that Vice President Pence was in serious danger, even as the mob, carrying Trump banners, was beating cops and breaching perimeters, the president sent a further tweet attacking his own vice president. Now, predictably and foreseeably under the circumstances, members of the mob seem to interpret this as a further inspiration to lawlessness and violence, not surprisingly. Later, even when the president did half-heartedly begin calling for peace, he didn't call right away for the riot to end. He did not tell the mob to depart until even later. And even then, with police officers bleeding and broken glass covering Capitol floors, he kept repeating election lies and praising the criminals. In recent weeks, our ex-president's associates have tried to use the 74 million Americans who voted to re-elect him as a kind of human shield against criticism. Using the 74 million who voted for him as a kind of a human shield against criticism. Anyone who decries his awful behavior is accused of insulting millions of voters. That's an absurd deflection. 70 hundreds of rioters did. 74 million Americans did not engineer the campaign of disinformation and rage that provoked it. One person did. Just one.
Now that was some scathing commentary. Speaking of scathing commentary from conservative sources, here's the headline of an article on your screen from the Wall Street Journal, and the article reads, "Acquittal vindicated the Constitution, not Trump. Impeachment is not a moral tribunal. It is a specific tool with a narrow purpose, restraining government officers." As per the Wall Street Journal. And I did mention as per the Wall Street Journal. I want to ask you, can you guess who wrote this article? Well, the author of this article is the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. There, you can see his name. He wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal, essentially reinforcing his position and his speech on the floor of the United States Senate. Now, I encourage our viewers and subscribers to read this article. I'll provide you with a link to this article in the description section below. But the one thing that really jumped out at me, and I'll quote the words of the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from the Wall Street Journal here. I quote, "There is a modern reflex to demand total satisfaction from every news cycle. But impeachment is not some final moral tribunal. It is a specific tool with a narrow purpose, restraining government officers. The instant Donald Trump ceased being the president, he exited the Senate's jurisdiction. I respect senators who reach the opposite answer. What deserve no respect are claims that constitutional concerns are trivialities that courageous senators would have ignored." He's basically saying that, hey, it's the Constitution. You can't just ignore it and say I was courageous to vote against the acquittal of Trump and to vote to convict Trump. That is what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is saying. This is some pretty intense stuff, folks. Here's the headline of an article on your screen from the Washington Post, which reads, "Now begins McConnell's project to shrink former President Trump's Republican influence." And shifting back to the Wall Street Journal, here's the headline of another article in the Wall Street Journal that reads, "McConnell does not care about Trump's brand in 2022. He just wants electable candidates." The only thing that the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell cares about is regaining or retaining control of the United States Senate as far as the Republicans are concerned. And for that, he wants candidates that people will vote for. This article says, Minority Leader's strategy to Republicans regaining Senate, channeling Trump's energy while limiting extremist hopefuls. Now, this is important, folks. This was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal article. When the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was specifically asked about the role of former President Trump in the Republican Party and in the electability of candidates moving forward, he paused and then he said this: "I don't rule out the prospect that he may well be supporting good candidates. I'm not assuming that to the extent the former president wants to continue to be involved, he won't be a constructive part of the process." And folks, Mitch McConnell also said, referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene, he said, "Loony lies and conspiracy theories are a cancer for the Republican parties," again referring to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And he also said, and again these are words from Mitch McConnell, "Georgia was a fiasco. We all know why that occurred." And here's an article on your screen from Politico. As always, we'll provide you the links to all of our resources in the description section below so you can check them out. The headline of this article reads, "McConnell's next chapter guiding the post-Trump Republican Party." The Republican senator from Kentucky is the leader for the next 2 years as former President Trump remains exiled in Florida with no real public platform, according to Politico. And now, folks, this is very important because this is what Mitch McConnell told Politico. My goal is, in every way possible, to have nominees representing the Republican Party who can win in November. Some of them may be people the former president likes, some of them may not be. The only thing I care about is electability. Wow. He also said, I'm not predicting the president would support people who couldn't win, but I do think electability, not who supports who, is the critical point. Pretty significant comments, folks, about where the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Remember, again, he is the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. Even they are in the minority, but he's still the leader. He considers electability a more important factor than the support of former President Trump. And he believes that Georgia made it clear that just because Trump backs a candidate does not mean that that candidate will win. Now, I also want our viewers to clearly understand the political dynamic, the power dynamic between former President Trump during his administration and the then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. This is an excellent outline from Jake Sherman over at Punchbowl News. You'll see his tweet on your screen, which was retweeted by John Bresnahan from Punchbowl News. And Jake tweeted, Republicans lost the House and the Senate under Trump. McConnell won the Senate majority without Trump. Without Mitch McConnell, Trump would have had exactly 0 legislative victories. Trump got 3 justices on the Supreme Court thanks to Mitch McConnell. Also, Mitch McConnell is still in office. By the way, he was re-elected by the voters in Kentucky, and by a pretty fair margin. And Trump was not re-elected by the voters of the country. Trump lost by 7 million votes. Was then accused of inciting a deadly attack on the Capitol incident, by the United States House of Representatives, by the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and by 7 Republican senators, in addition to 50 Democratic senators in the United States Senate. So I do think it's important to understand the power dynamic and put things in perspective and not just say, oh, there's one side to this. There are always many sides to the story, and this is a full side of the story. Excellent reporting from Jake Sherman and John Bresnahan. And folks, speaking of support, one individual who did not support former President Trump and voted to convict former President Trump in the House of Representatives is Congressman Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. Well, guess what? On your screen, you see the headline of an article published in the New York Times, Adam Kinzinger's lonely mission. Censured by his party and shunned by family members. He actually had family members who decided they didn't want to talk to him. Pretty incredible. Mr. Kinzinger is a 6th-term Illinois congressman, is pressing Republicans to leave Donald Trump behind, and in the process, he's actually risking his own career. And he's not the only one who's facing backlash within the Republican Party. And folks, while all this is happening, the ground is shifting beneath the entire Republican Party. We all remember David Perdue, the Republican senator who lost in the Georgia Senate runoff races. Pretty incredible what happened. David Perdue lost to Jon Ossoff. You'll see a tweet on your screen from David Perdue. And he says, Bonnie and I, and Bonnie Perdue is his wife, Bonnie and I are considering running in 2022. Here's my note on why. Let's show you his note on your screen. And I think the most important aspect of his message is on page 2 of his note. And on page 2, he talks about the progressive agenda, the agenda that he's concerned about from President Biden. On page 2, David Perdue writes, many believe that Biden would govern as a moderate, but in less than a month, we can clearly see that he has given in to the radical side of the Democratic Party. Executive orders like the one that kills the Keystone Pipeline and destroys our energy independence will have devastating consequences on the most vulnerable among us. And so he says, because we already have clear evidence of how radical the Biden administration would be, it is imperative that Republicans regain the majority in the US Senate in 2022 to have balanced government. Wow, pretty incredible. And if you thought that was incredible, here's the New York Times reporting that Michigan Republicans lean one way, fealty at all costs. And even after his defeat, former President Trump still seems to have a significant amount of influence in the Republican Party in crucial battleground states like Michigan. Loyalists are rewarded and dissenters face punishment, according to new reporting from the New York Times. Again, as always, you'll get a link to all of our resources in the description section below. Now, before I switch gears to former President Trump's response, let's go back to David Perdue for a second, really quick. On your screen, you'll see a headline from Axios. David Perdue says he's considering another Senate run in 2022. Now, David Perdue tweeted out something that was extremely interesting. He said, first, Georgia is not a blue state, and yet, as I write this today, the people of Georgia are represented by two of the most radically liberal individuals to ever occupy a seat on the hallowed floor of the United States Senate. They do not fairly represent most Georgians. Wow, this is a pretty interesting approach from David Perdue after graciously conceding to John Ossoff. Folks, the fight is on, and if anything, we will see the battle lines be drawn even further, and we will see the intensity intensify as we head towards the 2022 Senate elections. And now, folks, speaking of intensity, two big pieces of news about former President Trump and his lawyer Rudy Giuliani. Let's start with this tweet on your screen from Jim Acosta from CNN, who is not, I repeat, not former President Trump's best friend. There is no love lost between former President Trump and CNN, specifically Jim Acosta, who at one point lost his press pass and CNN had to go to court to be able to reinstate his press privileges in the White House. This is what Jim Acosta writes. Trump response to McConnell Mitch is a dour, sullen and unsmiling political hack, and if Republican senators are going to stay with him, they will not win again. Wow. So it's clear that former President Trump and the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who worked together for 4 years to advance the Trump administration agenda, are no longer friends. You'll see this statement on your screen from former President Trump. He also takes a shot at Mitch McConnell's wife. So let's take a look at this entire statement and let's scroll down towards the end of the statement, folks. These are very strong words from former President Trump. But guess what? We've now been accustomed to expecting such strong words. This is what he writes. My only regret is that McConnell begged. Folks, you can see the personal tone to these messages. My only regret is that McConnell begged for my strong support and endorsement before the great people of Kentucky in the 2020 election, and I gave it to him. He went from 1 point down to 20 points up and won. How quickly he forgets. Without my endorsement, McConnell would have lost and lost badly. Now his numbers are lower than ever before. He's destroying the Republican side of the Senate, and in doing so, seriously hurting our country. Now, keep in mind that McConnell thinks that the Republicans lost Georgia because of Trump. Let's be clear about that. But Trump obviously is blaming McConnell, as you can see. And Trump also continues, and this is where he takes an indirect shot at Mitch McConnell's wife. Likewise, McConnell has no credibility on China because of his family's substantial Chinese business holdings. He does nothing on this tremendous economic and military threat. He's now calling, former President Trump is now calling Mitch McConnell's family's business interests as, I quote, an economic and military threat. Pretty incredible. And then if you scroll down a bit further, Trump also says, I will back primary rivals who espouse making America great again and our policy of America first. We want brilliant, strong, thoughtful, and compassionate leadership, according to former President Trump. And finally, in a highly unusual move, folks, we all know Rudy Giuliani, a long-time personal attorney of former President Trump. Well, guess what? He's no longer with former President Trump. You'll see this headline from CNN, who just reported Giuliani no longer representing Trump in any legal matters. I told you this was going to be an eventful episode of Ignition Time. I hope you learned something new. Please give me a like. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications if you learn something new. I would greatly appreciate that. That really helps out the YouTube algorithm. Brings a smile to my face. Like that. Well, that didn't seem genuine. Let me try that again. It brings a smile to my face. See, that felt a lot more genuine to me. Hopefully you felt it was genuine, because it was genuine from my end. Folks, I'm in here making videos, staring into a camera, and with a bunch of lights shining in my face. So, you know, I have to remember to laugh at myself sometimes, and that's what I try and do. I'm actually a pretty funny guy. I'm a pretty goofy guy in person. I'm almost silly. If you met me in person, I'm pretty sure you'd be like, what's wrong with him? He's a nerd. He's a geek. And you would lose all respect for me. whatever respect I have. See, there's my nerdy side coming out. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Here's another nerdy smile.